You're watching Force 13's live streaming service. Well, a marathon Atlantic hurricane season is continuing with Hurricane Zeta, Category 1, with winds around 80 miles per hour, pressure hovering around 980 millibars. This storm is the latest in an extremely long list of Atlantic storms, number 27, tropical cyclone number 28 of the Atlantic hurricane season so far, and we're not even at the end of October. In terms of names, matching 2005's ending name, which finished on Zeta. And this one is yet another threat for the Yucatan Peninsula, where it's going to make a hurricane landfall shortly. And a potential Gulf Coast threat once again, with a hurricane watch and a storm surge watch out for places that we're pretty fed up of repeating. Those locations in Louisiana, not because we've anything against them, but we've got something against these hurricanes who have got something against Louisiana this year by the looks of things. Tonight, I'm joined by our team, consisting of Kay, Strat, and Wyatt. My name is Nathan Foy. It's nice to have you on board with us again tonight for more discussion on the tropics. Only four of us right now, and I've got a suspicion there might be a bit of fatigue setting in, but we're still here braving it right now, and Zeta is one of the main features. We've also got the Western Pacific Typhoon Molave, which looks like it's really getting its act together in the South China Sea, and eye appearing, could be on its way to Category 3 status shortly. Let's begin tonight by talking to Strat. You're joining us there. What's your take on Zeta?
You know, it had a burst of rapid intensification overall overnight, although based on the way we're talking about it going from a 50-mile-an-hour tropical storm to an 80-mile-an-hour Category 1, crossed that threshold, it's 25 knots, 30 miles an hour. It was generally forecast. Fortunately, the storm is looking to be struggling a little bit more now, with the latest Recon data coming in showing a bit more of a wobbly structure than we were seeing earlier a few hours ago. Regardless, further intensification is still certainly possible in the next 6 hours or so before this thing comes on shore along the northeastern tip of the Yucatan Peninsula, and impacts are already going to start to be felt there, and conditions will continue to rapidly deteriorate.
Well, you're saying it's not looking quite as good, but the cloud tops are really ballooning up this evening.
Yeah, northwest of the center there, a really strong burst of convection, but pressure dropping. Winds have slowed down a bit. The 5 p.m. update was 981 millibars. The last drop zone came in at 984, so at least some stalling out on that front as we see the storm come in. But that really doesn't minimize the threat that's coming in from this. Delta hit a similar area just a couple weeks ago. We had Gamma come in near hurricane strength just before that. This area has really been hammered this month so far.
In the space of just 1 month. Kay, you're looking towards its long-term effects and another surged hurricane threat for the Louisiana coast.
Yes, and another time that New Orleans has been inside a cone of a potential hurricane this season. It seems that this time it's finally going to hit New Orleans, with every other system having missed, which is unfortunate for New Orleans, but I think they'd much rather it be a low-end hurricane than, say, Laura or Sally that impacted them directly.
Well, you say that, but New Orleans has been in the cone many times. What makes you more confident that it will happen on this occasion? We're looking at Delta. That could have easily gone there.
The guidance has become much more tightly clustered on New Orleans. and even if the storm goes a bit to the east, it will still deliver hurricane conditions to part of Louisiana, just because of the way its track is projected. With the recurving, it'll still manage to clip the Mississippi Delta.
All right.
But regardless, it does seem quite likely that it will bring hurricane conditions to the New Orleans area this time.
We've also got Wyatt with us this evening. You're the closest person in this room to the storm and its projected track.
My goodness, you said earlier that we have fatigue. I have fatigue, all right, from these storms. This is like our 5th cone or whatever, and we're just about sick and tired of it around here, you know, but hurricane season's not over. We got to brace for yet another one. They're forecasting 40 to 50 mile per hour gusts, possibly even sustained winds depending on where the track goes of that magnitude for right here in the Pensacola area. And there is a tropical storm watch in effect for that area as well.
All right, let's read out the latest warnings in relation to Zeta right now. And some of these, if you've watched any of our recent streams, will sound very familiar because they are the same places, pretty much, that have been affected by previous storms, Delta being the most recent. Hurricane warning for Tulum to Zeelam, Mexico, and the island of Cozumel. A tropical storm warning for south of Tulum to Punta Allen, and west of Zeelam to Progreso, Mexico. A storm surge watch then is in effect for Intracoastal City, Louisiana to Navarre, Florida, Lake Bourne, Lake Pontchartrain, Vermilion Bay, Pensacola Bay, and Mobile Bay, all under storm surge watch. Hurricane watch for Morgan City, Louisiana to the Mississippi-Alabama border, including Lake Pontchartrain, Lake Maurepas, and metropolitan New Orleans. Tropical storm watch for the Mississippi-Alabama border to the Okaloosa-Walton County line in Florida, and west of Morgan City to Intracoastal City, Louisiana. So those are all the warnings out for this storm right now. Watches on the US Gulf Coast at this time. The storm is around on the NHC forecast cone there that we're looking at. They're suggesting that the storm will strike on Wednesday evening by the looks of it there. If you've got any comments or questions whilst we're on the air tonight, start your message with Force 13 all in text. And that's what Chrissy has done, saying, what are the wind shear dynamics for Zeta?
Well, right now at least, up until landfall in the northeastern part of the Yucatan Peninsula, still relatively low. The main thing holding it back will be upcoming land interaction and general structural issues. Despite any of those, it still had a period of rapid intensification. When it enters the Gulf of Mexico and this trough comes in and pulls it northward sharply, shear is going to increase very dramatically. So you're not going to see a storm strengthening in the Gulf of Mexico by any substantial margin by the time we really get to tomorrow afternoon. And some weakening is forecast before it finally comes on shore in Louisiana, although it is still more likely than not at this point that we are going to be seeing a hurricane strength storm coming on landfall regardless of the increase in wind shear.
Yeah. Somebody is asking how far inland will tropical storm winds extend, and that's actually a really good question because directly associated with it being a tropical cyclone, yeah, it's going to get pretty far inland. There is tropical storm watches that go up to like Greenville, Alabama, I believe, which means that tropical storm conditions are possible, and they could be extended even slightly further inland after that because this storm is going to be moving quickly. Then it will likely weaken to a tropical depression, but it will become a post-tropical cyclone, and then it's forecasted to re-strengthen, possibly producing an area of gale force winds, which could impact New England.
Looking at these frames right now, these cloud tops, just as the sunsets here, are massive. A significant pile of minus 80s in the cloud tops and some hot towers there. Let me try and get a temperature on that. Minus 91 degree cloud top there that's just emerged in the latest frame.
I mean, Zeta's had consistently very cold cloud tops over near its core, disassociated usually to the south of its center most of its life cycle, but these are now the north. We're seeing bursts up to minus 93 degrees yesterday and massive sustained areas of minus 80 plus. So, I mean, seeing them come around again is just an indication of how much thunderstorm activity the system is trying to blow up.
Let's take some questions then, because plenty of them have come in since I launched
And
that call to action.
That actually does make me want to point out, because of the extreme convective activity that is occurring with this storm, some of the winds that are higher up could possibly be mixed down.
That can't be good news. Although landfall is coming very quickly the way it's looking right now.
Hopefully that will disrupt what is happening with Zeta right now, but unfortunately that part of the Yucatan that it's going to go over is quite flat.
Mm-hmm.
And like we saw with Gamma, it didn't really weaken it until after it got well into the Yucatan. And I believe it was moving a bit slower as well.
Some questions there. What can we expect from Zeta in central North Carolina? On the edge of the cone there at the minute. Probably another remnant depression, probably in the transition phase of turning post-tropical. And I imagine you'll get maybe gusty winds to low tropical storm force, but it's speculation just that this moment it will be moving fairly quickly, so I imagine the rainfall totals won't be enormous.
It's going to be really dependent on the part of North Carolina you're in. The main difference, if we're looking at anything from days 4 and 5 now, and even day 3, is that models are now anticipating that at least the center of Zeta will remain independent as it interacts and tries to merge with this trough as it turns post-tropical of the United States. But rainfall should still be mostly restricted to the very western portions and northern tips of North Carolina. So you could see you're on the western half of the state and the very northern part of the state up to 1 inch. If you're in Appalachia, you could get localized higher amounts. The main rainfall threat, other than the landfall location and the first tail inland through Mississippi and Alabama, will actually be associated with trough, the area of low pressure that's actually causing the snowstorm out right now in the Rockies. As that comes across and picks this up and they interact together, you could see some elevated rainfall totals locally, or actually regionally, 2 to 4 inches, stretching back from Oklahoma all the way to the mid-Atlantic and southern New England as we head into this weekend, along with potential snowfall in New England as well.
Do we think wind impacts in Louisiana will be similar to Isaac in 2012?
I would actually compare it more to Nate, to be honest, because I think that it's going to make landfall as a hurricane, probably about 75 miles per hour, which is barely hurricane, and then right after landfall, like within a couple hours, it's going to weaken down into a tropical storm.
The main difference that kind of makes Nate a better analog than, say, Isaac of 2012 is Isaac was moving quite slowly as it came on shore. This thing is going to be moving at a very nice clip and accelerating as it moves inland too. So would have to concur on that front.
Yeah, it's going to. The good news is it's going to be an in and out thing, so there's not going to be prolonged wind impacts, nor storm surge, nor heavy rain or severe weather.
More questions here as well. How much strengthening can Zeta go through in the Gulf?
Once it gets about halfway in the Gulf is when the window will or the door will probably close for strengthening in the Gulf of Mexico.
Okay.
You're gonna have maybe a very brief period late on Tuesday after it emerges off of the Yucatan Peninsula where it can try to briefly reorganize. But by the time you get to Wednesday whatsoever, shear is going to pick up quite significantly as the trough picks it up. You're going to see southwest and northeast wind shear try to start stripping convection away. That's going to limit it, so you probably won't see the storm get much stronger, if at all, in the Gulf of Mexico, but you could see it try to maintain its intensity as it tries to reach the coastline. Let's
take a look at what else is going on around the world at this time. We have Typhoon Molavi, which is an intensifying typhoon, looking pretty good in those latest frames there. The eye really starting to appear. It's probably on the verge of reaching Category 3 status. This could be a significant threat for Vietnam, which has already had a lot of suffering this year from heavy flooding and storm after storm that have gone through there as well. This is going a little bit further south than a lot of those other storms have this year, but I imagine it's still going to be a bad situation, and especially if it stays at that intensity, model suggesting that will be the case. And elsewhere, Hurricane Allen says, do you know about the new subtropical storm Manny in the South Atlantic? Well,
you mean the subtropical trough?
Well, it's another trough that's been named by the looks of things, and hopefully it will appear here. Nope, we've not got that just now. That's a shame. I have seen imagery of it, and it doesn't look very good just yet, but it does have a chance tomorrow.
I think we were at the consensus. They tried to designate it last night. That at that point, it wasn't actually subtropical, but that it just still does have a window where it can try to become at least bona fide subtropical cyclone in the next 24 hours before conditions become more hostile.
Oh, here we go. We've got it now. There it is. So that's the storm in relation to the coast of Brazil. You can see where the center of the system is, and it's trying to gain those characteristics, but it's not got there yet. It's certainly not a subtropical storm by our standards just yet, but it does have storm force winds, as we saw on ASCAT earlier today. So that's that. Let's go back to what I would say the main feature is right now, the most priority feature, which is Zeta, which is about to make landfall on the coast of Mexico, the same area that was impacted by Gamma and then by Delta. So this area is really going through it right now. Let's see if there's more.
It's just been relentless this whole year for just about every part of the coastline in the Atlantic Basin.
Except for some reason South Florida.
Yes.
Which is normally the most hurricane-prone part of the United States.
Yeah.
Will this season have more than 30 named storms? 127 right now. It's going to be close.
It's entirely possible that we could exceed 30, which is a scary thought.
And the chances of a Category 5 hurricane this year, those chances are really dropping by this point.
But it is still possible to have one in November. And
Still possible.
This year looks to be giving it its best shot to create the conditions possible for one. But even then, it's still a matter of hitting the bullseye with the right disturbance in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, the window for anything in the main development region typically, or general North Atlantic north of the Caribbean, to reach a Category 5 is basically closed off unless something improbable happens, and it's closing pretty quickly in the Gulf. So, I mean, the area for a really strong system that we're looking for at this point, if one were to occur, would be in the Caribbean Sea towards the western half of it at this point.
Although, of course, there is the infamous Lenny that got to nearly Category 5 in the East Caribbean in late November.
And long-range models were suggesting, I'm not sure if they still are, but they were suggesting a few days ago that there could be something blowing up near Haiti.
Yep, the models are still pretty adamant right now, the GFS in particular, although others are trying to pick up on it towards the time frame that we could see a system try to form next week out of a tropical wave. So that's not within 5 days to the point where it's particularly reasonable to say with certainty yet that there's an area to watch. But if the trend continues for a couple more days, then we have to start watching the Central Caribbean or Western Caribbean for a system as we head into next week.
Okay, we're joined by Christian as well at this point. You've just done a video on this, haven't you?
I have done. I'm not actually sure if it's up yet.
You've been trying hard with that today.
I've been trying really hard with this today.
So you've been studying it quite closely. What are your thoughts of Zeta's evolution today?
I mean, I've got nothing to say as of now. I just guess we'll wait and see what happens.
Enormous
Latest
cloud
from
tops,
Recon
though.
is that it finally has developed an eye.
Oh, right. Are
Oh,
they in there
wow.
right now?
They are in there right now.
They
They're
are.
about to make a southeast to northwest pass, but on their first pass through, they found an eye that was elliptical, meaning oval shaped, and it was open in the west southwest. It's about
Ooh.
15 nautical miles in diameter, so it's perhaps slightly on the smaller side, but definitely not strengthening yet because it's maintained intensity over the last few hours since the last mission.
Again, and you can see this imagery here from Isaac right now, showing the very precise areas that have been blowing up the most. Those are what we describe as hot towers. Just small shoots of cloud that are blowing up above the whole convective plateau, as it were. But the whole complexion really has been a trend in gaining in those cloud tops, and that suggests an increase of energy and potentially intensity, K.
Potentially. Although it's up for some, I was actually expecting it to have dropped below 980, given that was only a 2 millibar drop from a couple of hours ago when we had the last fix at 981. Currently seems to be around 982, and the winds, at least in the north, have dropped off since last mission, so we're currently trying to work out what it's doing, because it seems to be very choppy, going up and going down, going left, going right.
How much time would you say there is until landfall at this point?
At this point, we don't have a up-to-date directional fix on its movement. We should hopefully shortly, but it looks like it might be going to the south of Cozumel, and in that case I'd say it has perhaps 5 hours until a landfall.
Because on this satellite imagery, it's very hard to tell where the actual centre is here. I take it that most of the convection is on the northwest of the centre.
Yeah, that looks to be just northwest of the center where that largest burst of deep convection is. And like Case said, we're looking at a system that waiting for a fix to get into back directional movement, but it's moving at about 10 miles an hour. So
It
we're really
posted the
around 6 hours.
reconnaissance diagram with the most recent center fix, with the cloud tops shown, so you can get a rough guess.
Let's see if we can just show that here. Just having a fumble about here. There we go. So that is Recon. That's recent.
Since it's about 45 minutes ago. Since that fix, the center will have moved further northwest, so it's probably due southeast of the bottom tip of Cozumel at this point.
Yeah, that gives us a good indication actually. And we'll see where they get on that next center pass.
Recon has just updated. They haven't made a center pass just yet, but in the southeastern eye wall, which it looks like is where they are right now, it looks like there's a single unflagged SFMR of 64 knots. But the flight level in that same place looks to be about 45 knots.
I would personally say that's an issue with the auto flagger because it all looks to be influenced by a rain spike.
Okay.
Let's see if we have any more questions at this point. You can send yours in live on our chat. Do you think this storm could shift and hit Texas?
No.
Yesterday, we had a higher chance of the European model trying to jump on board for that while everything else was saying no. You know, since then, the European model's fallen in line with the model consensus that this thing is very clearly going to come on shore, most likely in eastern Louisiana. The furthest west it can really feasibly get is central Louisiana. You're talking about a significant unforeseen deviation in a relatively short time frame for it to move all the way to Texas for a landfall spot.
Just now we've had a minus 92 degree cloud top.
Oh my, that's... Oh dear.
It's been sustaining a minus 90 hot tower throughout its hurricane period. Probably the best way to put it. It's been consistently producing these very deep towers of convection, but it's not organizing especially well despite all that.
How curious.
I mean, we mentioned really at the top of the hour too, but for a lot of this storm's life, it's had very cold cloud tops. Yesterday in the southeastern quadrant, it was having very consistent minus 80s and getting up into the minus 90s, and we're seeing that again on the northwestern side here, coming on shore shortly.
Somebody is asking about impacts to Florida. Yes, Florida will be impacted by this storm. The severity of the impacts will depend on the track. If it takes a more western track, let's say right into New Orleans, then the impacts might be less, like a couple gust tropical storm force along the coast, and then some rainfall in the western Florida panhandle, as well as a couple isolated tornadoes. Couldn't be ruled out. And if it takes a really far eastern track closer to the Alabama-Mississippi border, which is on the eastern side of consensus, northwest Florida could have a more direct impact with maybe even hurricane force gusts, depending on how sheared the storm gets and how intense it is at the time. And it will also have some heavy rainfall there. So.
I think we've also got Nelson on the line as well. You're in New Orleans, Nelson, and in the middle of another cone this year. What are your thoughts and the thoughts of people around you?
Well, it is that forecast fatigue that y'all talked about earlier. I haven't seen anyone outright dismiss it, but also today I was just at work conversing with the people there, and we're going to take a wait-and-see approach. We've had this lineup almost exactly with Delta just a few weeks ago. And so we don't know if the storm will end up on the exact track path. So the idea is to be ready, to know the options, to know the possible damages, and then to work under that paradigm.
Yeah. But first of all, I guess wait and see is the right thing to do just at the moment as Zeta makes landfall on the Yucatan, because that could change a lot of parameters. But it generally looks like on the model consensus that you're going to get something from this one.
Yeah, and I would not be surprised by it. These things don't have actual probabilities. You say it's time for one place to get it or not. That doesn't have any real scientific meaning, but it is time. And, when you say wait and see, that depends on your level of preparation. I have plenty of food. I've got plenty of water. I need to go put gas in my car. All my chargers are full and topped up. I'm going to have my phone on a continuous charge from about now on. So I have taken all the preparations for previous storms and have enough supplies left over that I can wait and see. Now, if you are short on food, toiletries, medicine, if you think you need sandbags to protect your house because you live in a low-lying area, you need to be on that now, because the Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans has released a statement saying that all 99 of the drainage pumps are available and working. Turbines 1, 3, and 6 are available. The 5 spare EMD generators, which are essentially, they look like the back of a semi-trailer, but they are giant generators. Those are working. Turbine 4, which is one of the ways that's used to pump the water out of the city, apparently had an electrical fault just yesterday, and it's being repaired, so it won't be available for the event. And Turbine 5 exploded last December. So we are down a little bit of power for the lower-lying areas, especially in New Orleans. I know we've got some people in the chat, one from Covington who was asking about power. Other people from, sorry about that, that's my dog. We are all very sick at this time, so that's why my voice sounds shaky. They asked about, I lose power in Covington or Slidell, Mandeville, whatever it may be. Well, take a look around you. Look up. Do you live in an area with a lot of tree branches and exposed power lines? If that's the case, yes, you're probably going to plan on it. You know, you can't say for sure, but if you've got exposed power lines and a lot of trees, there are a lot of ways for the power to go out.
We've just had a question there. The satellite imagery shows that the mid-level center and low-level center tilted, confirmed by Recon. Well, first of all, is it confirmed by the team here? And is that going to prevent this storm from strengthening? Any comment on that?
If I go back to the center drop sonde we had from the last, no, the eye wall structure, or the eye at least, appears to be pretty well vertically aligned. Doesn't show any tilting in the eye. We haven't had the next update from Recon just yet, but something that I've been looking at just now is the HWRF model for the 18Z run, which has just had some upper level recon and low level recon fed into it from earlier on in the day, and it wants the storm to strengthen a bit, getting into the upper 970s before landfall in the Yucatan, moving off the coast at around in the mid to upper 980s, so probably a tropical storm at that point. But then remarkably, it shows significant deepening in the Gulf, getting into the 960s and making landfall as a Category 2, heading straight through New Orleans, which I'm not too sure about. I've looked at the model soundings and it indicates there'll be 25 knots of shear while it's a Category 2.
But then you've had really strange looking Category 2 storms in the Gulf at this time of year before, things that look absolutely appalling yet have the winds.
I guess the difference though between those is, you know, if you want to use Delta as an example, it was coming down from a, you know, substantially higher peak. You know, it was already a Category 4 and had gotten back up to a mid-end Category 3. You know, this system doesn't really have much time left to strengthen before it comes on shore. You know, it's going to be very hard-pressed for it to get to a Category 2, and I don't think the consensus is really looking for something at that. We're looking if there's going to be any more strengthening in the next few hours, that it would get to 85.
The HWRF thinks it'll go from 70 miles an hour to 105 miles an hour in 12 hours, and then stay at 105 for the next 12 hours up to landfall.
I mean, considering right now it's 6 hours from landfall and it's at 80, it isn't really particularly likely that model solution comes true unless something, you know, that isn't expected by any, you know, mean forecast that takes into consideration all the models and environmental factors to occur.
What the HWRF seems to be indicating is that this will re-strengthen somewhat in the Gulf of Mexico, and then once it heads into the higher shear, it won't weaken significantly and will likely hold intensity from that point until landfall. I mean, as it accelerates.
That's what's being looked at mostly by forecasts, just at a much lower degree, because it has a small window when it first enters the Gulf of Mexico, about 12, maybe 18 hours, you want to be generous, to where the shear won't be picking up yet, and it can try to reorganize and gain some steam. The odds that after it encounters land disruption, that it'll be able to ramp up to such a degree before the shear comes in and inhibits it, I would definitely call it an outlier based on the, you know, consensus forecast saying, okay, this can, you know, deviate around a bit between 75 and 80 miles an hour for, you know, about the day and a half or so that it's in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we've got just now. I was going to go somewhere else just for a moment, but let's just recap where we're at right now. Zeta is an 80 mile per hour Category 1 storm. The National Hurricane Center will be updating shortly. And obviously we may get some more news about potential warning extensions if there are any. I'm not sure there will be actually, but this is getting pretty close to land. And just another satellite update there. Again, more hot towers, this time minus 93 in one isolated spot.
We've had some microwave imagery after a 6-hour gap.
Okay. Let's see if we can get this up here. Here we go.
Yes. Can finally see the eye.
So there's the eye, that's rather clear. What else can you tell us from this image?
It shows that while there's a strong convective presence to the west, to the east of the centre, it's quite open and diminished to the west and south, which means that there should be an even weaker impact to areas south of the landfall than usual on the weaker side of the storm. It's going to be even less impactful than usual, but that's not to say that it won't be damaging. You can still expect 50 knot damaging winds, maybe hurricane force gusts in coastal areas, and that can still cause damage to the houses, so no one should be taking it any less seriously because of this abnormal structure, is perhaps the way to put it. Certainly not typical.
Let's see if we can get Isaac's view there as well, showing us the latest from Playa del Carmen. Looking like this right now. You can see the waves coming in. Doesn't look like the... well, a little bit more than you would expect. Obviously the trees are blowing, so you've got sustained winds there. Obviously it's night time there, that's why the image quality is somewhat lacking, but there's the latest view out there. Sort of what you'd expect at this stage.
Yeah, and someone's asking how many distance, how many miles is this from the coast? I mean, we're looking at a system that's going to be making landfall in a bit less than 6 hours now, and moving at about 10 miles an hour. So if you just want to extrapolate it out from that, you're going to say a little under 60 miles from shore, although we are going to be getting a 8 p.m. advisory, Eastern Time, 7 p.m. Central, probably within the next 20 minutes or so, and we'll get the official position update. We'll be able to use that to get a direct estimate from potential landfall areas.
This could even make landfall on Cozumel, and if it did that, then landfall would be in about maybe just 2 or 3 hours.
It appears that it'll be moving very close to the southern tip of Cozumel. It might be a case of the eye goes over, but the centre stays just offshore.
Speaking of Cozumel, this was actually an observation from almost 2 hours ago. They were reporting wind gusts of 40 miles per hour. I think the winds might have increased since then, though, because the storm has gotten closer.
Certainly wouldn't be a surprise. What about the rest of the tropics is a question that we've received there. Well, in the Atlantic, there's not much else going on in the tropics right now, but we can take a look nonetheless. You can see the full picture here. Is there anything that you guys would like to talk about there? There is that...
At this time of year, unusually, there are still tropical waves in the coming off Africa.
There's a system moving through Bermuda right now, which has a small chance of just throwing up a cyclone, but it's going to be short and sweet, I would imagine, if that happens.
Yeah,
I'm not expecting anything from it.
No, I mean, the odds of that are still pretty low. It could technically happen. I'm pretty sure actually that's the first piece of energy that the National Hurricane Center was tracking, saying it was in the Caribbean, it offshoots the northeast and maybe developed there. And then we ended up getting another piece of energy from that area that became Zeta instead. You know,
And now it's a hurricane.
Yeah, that's true. Fortunately, we're not really looking at anything that has any substantial chance of additional development in the next 5 days right now. But the Caribbean is definitely an area to watch early next week, into the middle of next week. Multiple models are now indicating that we could see a tropical cyclone develop in the central or western Caribbean at that time frame and potentially impact land areas.
Another Recon update has come in. and an extrapolated pressure of 983.5 millibars was reported in the center.
Ooh.
So that's about the same as last time, which would indicate it's still maintaining as it is and not strengthening, which is a good thing.
Yes.
Okay, plenty more questions there, which we'll get to shortly. Just a little look there. This is what's also happening. This is the Western Pacific, Typhoon Molavi, which is looking rather good in those latest images. The eye starting to come out bit by bit there, and maybe even getting towards -20s in terms of temperature in there. Northwestern side looks a little less convincing, but convection has been decent, and that could be a borderline category 3 there. And
I mean,
headed
that
towards
fits
Vietnam.
most of the forecasts that we were seeing yesterday, that this thing would try to really get its act together pretty quickly, get towards category 3 strength, and it looks like we're really about to reach that category with it.
And we should get daylight imagery soon. Yes, there it is, just appearing actually. So those are the first visible images over the storm. You can just see it coming into play on those latest frames. So the eye is visible, it's not just the infrared that's picking that up. We've got loads of questions here. On Recon, SFMR has several peaks until the actual eye, so are there several eye walls like Sally had? Is a question that we've received.
There's a lot of rain interference that's causing disruption in the SFMR readings, but it appears there's an outer banding feature and then the inner eye wall. It's still a messy picture.
Could this become a major hurricane?
It doesn't seem likely anymore.
Yeah, its main window to do such a thing would have been if it intensified at double the rate it did over the past 24 hours. Instead of going up 30 miles an hour, it would have had to go up, let's say 50, trying to intensify up into landfall as well to do that. By the time it enters the Gulf of Mexico, it's going to have had its center disrupted a bit from land, have a brief period to reorganize, but shear will be sharply limiting intensification and likely either holding it steady or weakening it slightly for the last day to day and a half before landfall. So its main opportunity to get to such a strength would have been today and last night.
A lot of questions regarding when the next Atlantic storm will be, because people just can't get enough of the ones we've already got.
It seems probable that there will be something in the first half of November, but beyond that we can't really say anything at this time.
Again, we really can't say anything. We can't see that far into the future.
Yeah, anything past 5 days is exceedingly murky and speculative. So, we try our best to stay within that time frame. If you want an area to potentially watch, models are saying there's an area of interest to potentially watch next week, but we still have to wait, a couple more days, see if more models pick up and hold on to it for that to really be verified, other than saying, this is something that could be interesting to watch as we head into next week.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. It's people want 2020 to beat 2005, which I completely understand. At the same time, why?
Well, depends who you ask about whether people want 2020 to beat 2005's numbers. I'd rather it didn't.
I mean, again, I'd also rather it didn't as well. I mean, how many storms did 2005 again? On top of memory, I think it was, 28? I could be wrong though?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think 2020 is also on 28.
27.
27, okay. We just happen to have a 28L, which
Yes,
But I think
one
we've already
system
not
this year
had.
didn't form.
Yes, we've already gone past the point of having a 2005 because we haven't had 6 landfalling major hurricanes.
Yep.
yeah.
I think people are getting all the time really excited about, the number of named storms. But, I mean, Nathan, you wrote an article on the website, force13.com earlier today about the ACE globally and in the Atlantic this year. despite the record-breaking pace of storms, we're nowhere near a record on ACE. We're above average, but not by an astronomical degree. And that's because even though we've had 27 tropical storms, less than half of them have become hurricanes, and we've only had 3 of them become major hurricanes so far.
Consider
4.
this. 1933 holds the accumulated cyclone energy record for the Atlantic with an ACE of, I think it was 251 or something really silly like that. And only in the last week or so, with Epsilon, have we reached half of what happened in 1933.
And, part of that is those stronger storms we've had, the 4 major hurricanes. Delta. 3 of them were only really stronger for a relatively short time frame. Laura only became a major hurricane, less than 18 hours before landfall. Delta only reached its highest peak very briefly before beginning to weaken and didn't have a very long secondary peak in the Gulf of Mexico. And Epsilon, while doing something quite improbable for its location, also was not a major hurricane for that long.
I mean, honestly, with the Epsilon video that I covered, it did take a very long time, but I'm glad that we got it out when we got it out, because news had just broken that it was a Category 3. So I was able to update the video with Category 3 icons and push it out.
Yes. But right now we have Hurricane Zeta, which is a Category 1, and looks like it's leveled off in intensity at 80 miles per hour. We'll see whether the National Hurricane Center verifies that when they put their update out soon. We're here just for the hour tonight, so Strat will know what to do next. We will be... What happened earlier today, we have the 24/7 stream that runs and shows an automated feed of all the tropical activity around the world. Well, for some inexplicable reason, the streaming computer went down, the internet there went down today, which for some reason it was fine here 5 feet away from it, so I don't know what happened. But it will come back online as soon as we finish our stream tonight, so we can hop back on with the automated feed there as well. Of course, we also have updates throughout our social platforms on Facebook and Twitter, as well as regular YouTube videos, which there will of course be more of, and I imagine we'll have plenty more live events daily as Zeta approaches the US Gulf Coast. But that's just a little update on what's been going on here. What is the coldest cloud tops in a hurricane is the question we've just received.
I don't know if anything in the Atlantic has ever gotten to -100, but a couple of typhoons and cyclones in the western and southern Pacific have gotten there. So, but the record was Kumuri, wasn't it? That was 109.8, I think.
It was very high indeed, in terms of altitude.
Yeah, Zeta right now, at least, if we're talking about Atlantic systems, it hit negative 93 yesterday, and I think it just hit negative 92 or negative 93 degrees
just
Celsius
now, yeah.
again. Yeah. So those are some of the colder cloud tops you'll actually see in the entire basin. Now, I'm not really a cyclone historian, so I can't tell you, where that ranks on the record book. But that will definitely be in the upper percentile of systems in terms of the coldest cloud tops recorded.
I don't know about the Atlantic, but it must be up there. Let's see what else we have at this point. Molavi almost appears to have a saw blade appearance with a very sharp, almost ragged appearance. And do we agree with that? Just taking a look back at Molavi again. We are covering more than one storm tonight, so you'll see them cycling around every so often. You can see it here. You've got the eastern side there, that is what you described, but I think it's well shielded, the center of the storm, and I should imagine that intensification won't be interrupted for a little bit longer yet.
Yeah, I mean, if you take a look at just the bottom half and see the extent, especially in infrared, you can get the analogy. but the core is still really well defined, much more so than last night when it had just come off of Mindoro. So at least on that front, it won't really be encountering any significant issues until we get into tomorrow. Wind shear starts to pick up.
Yes, so there it is, continuing on a westward motion towards Vietnam, and they're in for a lot more rain and wind, which will compound a already bad situation with flooding over there, from what we gather. Let's get back to Zeta. We're still struggling for position estimates. Do we have another recon fix?
We are shortly to get one.
Okay. Then let's
But,
take a look back at the webcam there at player.com.
I'm really not seeing winds supportive of a hurricane at this time. I don't know what's going on with the storm, but I wouldn't be surprised if the National Hurricane Center drops it to 75 miles an hour at the update.
They'll probably be in the northeastern quadrant based on what we got that allowed them to upgrade it to a hurricane in the first place, even though the cloud tops there aren't as impressive. That's where they got the readings to make it a hurricane beforehand. If we're looking at a position area, we're not getting an exact center fix yet, but we'll probably get that the next update. It looks that it'll be around 86.4 degrees west and about 19.6 or 19.7 degrees north as a general area for where that's going to be. So it is getting close to land right now.
Is the Eastern Pacific officially dead for the remainder of the year? If so, then it failed miserably. Hold on, because it might not be over just yet in the Eastern Pacific. There's still a chance as far as around November 10th, 11th, 12th maybe, that there could be a major hurricane in the Eastern Pacific. There could be one, we don't know just yet, but keep watching, and probably all clear if we get to mid-November without any sign of life.
Although, interestingly, we could potentially try to see some subtropical development in the Central Pacific later this week and potentially into early next week. GFS has been trying to flirt with the possibility for about a couple days now. It doesn't have very strong model support, so it isn't really a particularly likely outcome. But, just another message. Even though we're in a La Nina and the Eastern Pacific has been pretty suppressed, those areas aren't really out of the woods in terms of new development yet.
And again, we're looking at another webcam here. I assume that's in the same area. Quite high up actually, and you can see the situation there. Lots of rain falling, the trees swaying there, potentially tropical storm force gusts at that location. National Hurricane Center will be updating shortly. We're staying on for that before we conclude this commentary, and then we'll have the 24/7 automated feedback up. But just to reiterate the warnings that are in effect at the moment, and we'll see if there's any changes shortly. Hurricane warning for Tulum to Zeeland, Mexico and Cozumel. Tropical storm warning for south of Tulum to Punta Allen, Mexico, and west of Zeeland to Progreso. Storm surge watch for Intracoastal City, Louisiana to Navarro, Florida. Hurricane watch for Morgan City to the Mississippi-Alabama border. Tropical storm watch for the Mississippi-Alabama border to Okaloosa, Walton County line, Florida, and west of Morgan City to Intracoastal City, Louisiana. That's just a brief roundup of those watches and warnings. They probably won't change. Looking back at that webcam there, what do we reckon? Do we think that's a surge coming in there, or is it still fairly normal levels? Hard to tell there.
You're going to see some elevation, although just because the storm's in more of a developmental stage, you're not going to see particularly high totals, although you could see, upwards of 3 feet of inundation at the worst areas north of the center where it makes landfall.
Yeah, that did maybe that was some minimal surge happening because it looked like it was like really, really close to those trees there. I wouldn't imagine they would be that close on a normal day to the water.
Not sure.
I'm seeing the latest pressure is 983 millibars, which is up 1 from the last pass.
And it's likely that the National Hurricane Center are waiting to the last minute, as they often do when they have live observations inside the storm. It's the best way to get information.
And this drop sond was at 19.9 north, 86.5 west. So you can use that for some distance calculations if you want to.
19.9 north, 86.5 west is 40 miles off the southern tip of Cozumel.
So if they still have it moving at about 10 miles an hour, that would bring it potentially about 4 hours from landfall if it keeps up its current northwest trajectory. If it were to try
The
to
update's
skirt
out.
just on the southern coast.
7 p.m. Central Time. 80 miles per hour still. A pressure of 983 is what they've gone with. There has been a change. Hurricane warning from south of Tulum to Punta Allen, Mexico. And from west of Zilam to Progreso, Mexico on the north coast. So basically, the areas that were in a hurricane, or was it a tropical storm watch warning earlier, are all now in hurricane warnings. So basically, all the areas that were in any warning in Mexico are now in a hurricane warning.
Yeah, there's no more tropical storm warnings anywhere right now.
And they've maintained it at 80 miles an hour due to uncertainty with reconnaissance not having fully sampled the storm at this time. But if we are unable to find evidence of 80-mile-an-hour winds, it might drop down at the next full advisory in 3 hours.
They're obviously being cautious because it's so close to land. They're going to stay high as long as possible, really, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
And to just, I've not read this out actually during our broadcast, but for storm surge expectations at the moment, they're expecting 4 to 6 feet between Port Fourchon to Dauphin Island, including Lake Bourne, Louisiana and Alabama there. 2 to 4 inches in neighboring areas. Extending
I think
up
you meant
to...
feet on that part.
Did I say... What did I say?
You said inches.
2 to 4 feet for those areas up to Navarro, Florida, and westwards. It's been a long year to Intracoastal City and beyond.
I think the amount of times we've had to say Intracoastal City on this on a stream this
Too
year
many.
has just been far too many. There was an interesting graphic I saw on Twitter that had made highlighted certain regions based on how many advisories this season they've been under a 5-day cone, and South Central Louisiana is like smack in the middle. I think it's been like almost 15 days this year that they've been inside a 5-day cone at some point. So they've just been getting absolutely hammered this season. It's more likely than not Zeta makes landfall in Louisiana. That'd be the 5th storm to make landfall in the state this year.
It's incredible, isn't it? I'm just actually moving my position because I've got to go over to the other PC to set up the live stream, but I'm sure I suppose at this point we should talk about our final comments on Zeta and Molavi.
Yeah, just a recap about Zeta. It's going to likely stay at its current intensity, possibly either weaken slightly or intensify slightly before landfall in the Yucatan, and then once it emerges over the Gulf of Mexico, it will have a small time period for it to slightly intensify before it will begin to weaken due to shear and cooler sea surface temperatures before the U.S. landfall. And I do want to remind you that a strong tropical storm, for example, 70 miles per hour and a 75-mile-an-hour minimal hurricane, there's not much difference. It's going to be similar impacts, and even if it's sustained at 70, you will likely have hurricane force gusts with that.
Yeah, for people in Mexico, in the Yucatan Peninsula that are under hurricane warnings, their preparations should already be complete. Conditions are deteriorating now and will continue to do so. If you're in Louisiana like Nelson, who was on the stream earlier today, Preparation should be rushed to completion tomorrow, and everything should be done by the time you get to Wednesday morning ahead of this system's approach. That goes for anywhere along the coast, in the cone, and even outside the cone, because as shear comes in, convection restricts the north and east areas further away from the center. Will begin to get impacts sooner than what you're seeing right now. And even so, impacts do always tend to extend outside the cone at times, so make sure you're taking the proper precautions to stay safe.
And hopefully that's all sorted over there just now. But we'll be finishing up here on the main stream. It's all very complicated over here. But thanks very much for tuning in, and thanks ever so much to my team for taking part again tonight. We've got a long week ahead by the looks of things, with not one but two tropical cyclones that will be making landfall on either side of the world, and well, you never know, we may get one or even two nameable cyclones in the South Atlantic this week. Crazy
if both
times.
of them develop, it's going to be absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah, it'll be crazy. But already we've got enough to talk about, I think, with Zeta and the like. We'll have many more updates on our YouTube channel on Force 13. And of course you can follow us on our social platforms, Facebook and Twitter, and join the discussion on our Discord server, discord.gg/Force13, to chat with around 1,200 like-minded hurricane watchers and even weather watchers at this point. We're widening out our scope, I think. But in the meantime, we're signing off for now. We'll have more updates on all of those platforms. Stay safe over there on the coast of Mexico, because Zeta is moving in.